If you've been driving around the Ford Figo for a while, or maybe the Swift, and want something better and bigger which offers you the practicality of a boot and aspire for the better life, then the Ford Figo Aspire is a car that you should check out. Well, you know what I did with the intro there. Let's have a look at the cabin now, shall we? In terms of the styling, the Aspire really does look like a very charming product. The big Aston Martin-like grille, those stretch-back lamps, and that nice side profile gives it a lot of personality. The short and stubby boot though does not really give it a well-balanced look. But that said, this is easily the best looking car in this competitive entry sedan segment. Well, here I am now inside the cabin of the new Figo Aspire, and the first thing you'll notice inside this cabin as soon as you step in is that it's a very practical place. There are a lot of places to keep your knickknacks as well as those big bottles from your home. In fact, you get a total of 7 bottle holders in the front seats of the Aspire. You get 3 right over here besides the handbrake, and you get 2 each in the door bins on both the sides, which makes this a very good place if you are someone who goes on those long highway trips and has a lot of thirsty passengers. You get this big box over here where you can keep your wallet and cell phone. You get a decently sized glove box. It's not really very generous, but it's decent. You of course get this big tray where you can keep your wallet. Well, if you are someone who likes to hide that chocolate or some chewing gum from the other occupants of the car, Ford have thought about you, and they have given a secret hideaway in this car where you can keep those little knickknacks. And I'll just show that to you now by putting this little tic tac in the side of the door over here and closing it. No one else knows about it except you. And the quality levels seem to have gone up a notch or two from the earlier Ford cars, including the Fiesta as well as the EcoSport. Well, even though the cabin feels and looks like an upmarket place to be in, on close inspection of the AC controls as well as the volume control over here, you will realize that the controls are very fiddly to operate and don't really have that same tactile feel which cars like the Maruti Suzuki Swift Desire as well as the Hyundai Accent deliver. Well, the other negative, of course, is the fact that the dials look rather staid and boring, and that's something you don't really expect from Ford cars, do you? Well, Ford really has loaded this car with a lot of features, and to know each and every detail of those features, you can go to our website by clicking on this link over here. Well, in terms of comfort, these seats are pretty okay for those long journeys because the seat scob is pretty wide as well as long, and what that means is that under-thigh support is pretty good. Well, even though the cabin feels like a very well bolted together place, some users will be a little irritated and confused when they use this entertainment system over here, because this plethora of buttons can confuse when you are on the move. Well, the negative inside the Aspire's cabin is the fact that the rear visibility is pretty poor, and the glass area, as you can see, is pretty slanted, and that means that you don't really get a good view when you are reversing this car. And these side view mirrors don't really help matters because they really are very small and piddly, so that's something that Ford should really take a look into. Well, here I am now in the back seat of the new Aspire, and as you can see, headroom is generous, and kneeroom is pretty decent too, considering my height is 5'10", and I have adjusted the front seats as always for my driving position. What Ford have done is a very intelligent thing over here. They have raised the front seats so you get place below them where you can stretch your feet, and that adds to the sense of space inside the cabin. Well, even though there are 7 cup holders in the front seats, there are nothing at the back, and the door bins really don't have any bottle holders in them, which is a gross oversight from Ford, and they should correct this. But that said, this is a good place to be. The seats are comfortable, the under-thigh support is decent, and the backrest angle is pretty good as well. Well, even though it is a wide car at the back, you can't really sit 3 over here for those long journeys because there's a huge hump in the floor panel, and what that means is that whoever will be sitting here will really struggle for knee room and leg room with the other 2 occupants on the sides, and that makes it a strict 2-seater at the back. Well, one of the biggest reasons why people choose an entry-level sedan is because of the practicality that the boot offers them. In terms of size and space, it is pretty decent, but there's a lot of suspension intrusion into it, and as you can see, the aperture is really narrow, which means that you will have to be very careful while you put in those big boxes into it. Well, the other negative, of course, is the fact that there's a big loading lip over here. There's a bit of a lip, and what that means is that if you have a big bag to put into this, you'll have to be very careful and put your back into it. So not a great car for those big airport transfers. And it's also not the class leader. The Honda Amaze remains the class leader when it comes to boot capacity. Well, Ford will offer you 2 engine options on the Aspire. There's a 1.2 litre petrol motor, and there's also a 1.5 diesel. And the diesel really is the one to go for, not only because it offers you a very punchy power delivery, but it also offers you good fuel efficiency figures. Now Ford of course claim a figure of 25 kpl plus, and that's a figure that is at par with most of its rivals in this segment. Well, if you have driven the Fiesta before, or even the older Fiesta, the Fiesta Classic, then you will be left a little underwhelmed with the driving experience of this Aspire, because it does not have that same driver focused engagement as well as a dynamic chassis. But that said, it's not really in a class or category where cars are known to be driver focused, so in that sense it's pretty decent and pretty okay. Well, if you've driven the diesel version of the Ford Figo ever, then the new Aspire will remind you of that car, because it's very similar in terms of the power delivery. Power starts coming in from a relatively low 1600-1700 RPM, which is very good for a diesel engine, and even when you rev it hard, it remains a very refined and quiet motor, which makes the cabin a very peaceful place to sit in. Well, just like the Figo, the gearbox on the Aspire diesel is very similar. It's got a nice and positive throw to it, and feels very nice to operate, feels very crisp. Well, even though the gearbox is crisp and pretty accurate for most of the part, I have to say that it's not as accurate or as slick as the one on the Maruti Suzuki Swift Desire. Well, if you are a keen driver, then you will be left a little underwhelmed with the driving experience of the Aspire, no matter which motor you choose, the diesel or the petrol. And the fault doesn't lie with those motors, it largely lies with the steering wheel, the gearbox, as well as the chassis, which simply does not have the same dynamic nature as say maybe the Fiesta as well as the Classic from the house of Ford. Well, if you are someone who travels a lot on the highways, you will like the suspension setup on the Aspire. It has a slightly harsh edge to the ride, but it feels very stable and reassuring on the highway, and on flat surfaces it really does give you a lot of confidence of doing speeds in excess of 100 kph. Well, but the downside of a firm suspension is the fact that when you are maneuvering this car around a pothole road in the city, those bumps and those badly surfaced roads will make their presence felt into the cabin. Well, the steering on the Aspire is slightly on the heavier side, so what that means is that unlike the Hyundai Accent and the Swift Desire, which offer very, very light steering wheels, this one can be a bit of a handful when you are maneuvering it around traffic. But that said, it offers you decent feedback and has decent communication as well. So even though the Aspire isn't really the keen driver's car we expected it to be, it still is a pleasurable car to drive. Well, despite those minor negatives, the Figo Aspire comes across as a stylish car which offers you a very punchy as well as fuel-efficient diesel engine, a nicely made cabin, and a good features list as well, making this a strong package in the highly competitive entry sedan space. But before you decide to buy one, don't forget to watch our review of India's largest selling sedan, the Maruti Suzuki Swift Desire, by clicking on this link above, and also its other challenger, the Honda Amaze, by clicking on this link over here. And as always, don't forget to subscribe by clicking on our logo below. It's bye for now, and hope to see you soon.